Hello KBC, it's Pastor Brian here. Welcome to my home. This is where I'm spending a lot of my time right now, and I'm sure you're spending a lot of time in your own home right now. And I really just wanted to welcome you into my place. This is my favorite place actually. This is out on my pool deck right now. And especially today, wow, what a day. I just noticed it got up to double digits today and got a lot of things done around the house. Got a lot of things done outside. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I'm a 90% guy. Now, you're probably wondering, what does that mean, 90%? I love to do renovations, love getting things done around the house, love whatever I can do. My problem is, as a 90% guy, I only get 90% done. So I've made a goal over the last couple days and over the next couple weeks to get the rest of it done. One of the things I got to do actually today was work on my front door. I got my front door all freshened up, got a new coat of paint on it, got the handles all sprayed up, and it's perfect because as we get the rest of the house done, that first thing people witness is the door is the first thing they're going to see about their house and the first impression of the house. And as a 90% guy, I've got actually a pretty interesting story, because all of my projects seem to be about 90%. And with the 90%, I remember my basement in our old house. What was interesting about this is, I just got to that place where it was 90% done. I loved my basement, relaxed in my basement, enjoyed my basement until one day our basement flooded. And as it flooded, I'm like, oh man, all this hard work down the drain. But as I called the insurance company's like, yeah, no problem. We'll come in and we'll fix up your basement. And they fixed it up. They fixed it up to a point where it's 100% done. The only project in my house that was 100% complete. Couple weeks later, I remember Bree was probably about a year and a half, and we were heading out, and she was probably a little bit older, maybe two, as she had been potty trained, and I put her in the car seat and went back in the house, went back out to the van, and she says, "Daddy, I peed myself." And I'm like, oh man. So I brought her back in the house, took off her clothes, threw the clothes in the sink, turned the water on, put some new clothes on her, put her in the van, and we headed off. Yeah, we headed off. And I forgot to turn off the sink. Well, the sink ran and ran. When I got home, it just ran all over the place, down the stairs, into the basement, and it all over our laminate floor. I'm like, oh man, I spent the entire night just trying to clean up the water, removing the laminate flooring, if you know laminate flooring, trying to get it all dried off before it swelled up. And what was 100% done, when I put it back in place, I only put it back in place 90%. That's just who I am, a 90% guy when it comes to these renovations. And so, yeah, why do I tell you the story? Well, let's dive into John chapter 13. And as we dive into John chapter 3, and I think about my front door, again, as a guest in anybody's house, my first instinct is to take off my shoes because my shoes will be dirty, and I don't want to track the mud through their house, so I take off my shoes. And see, in this New Testament time, the Jews, the Israelites especially, would have been, it would have been pretty common because they wore sandals everywhere as they went, and they just would have been walking through mud, walking through dirt, walking through dust, walking through animal, whatever. And so as they went into people's houses, there was always a servant that was there that would wash off their feet, especially before a supper. And so here we catch up the story, where it says, it was just before the Passover feast. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world and to go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet. I can just picture the scenario right now as the disciples walk into the house. This is particularly possibly the upper room where Jesus would have had the Last Supper with his disciples. So it says in John that this is 6 days before the Passover meal. And so as the disciples walk into this room, I'm sure they're all kind of looking at each other and wondering, where's the servant? Or maybe they just knew that there wouldn't be a servant available. Maybe this was just their hideaway spot, and so there was no servant around. And some Jews insisted that Jewish slaves even should not be required to wash the feet of others. So this was too lowly a position for even Jewish slaves. This job should be reserved for the Gentile slaves, or for women and children and pupils. And so as they all looked at each other, they all probably just maybe curiously wondered, maybe we just shouldn't even bother washing our feet, because nobody's going to wash our feet. So maybe they all just kind of slipped in, and maybe nobody really noticed, or maybe nobody will say anything, and they probably all just kind of gathered into the room. And that seemed to be fine with everybody. Nobody grabbed the rag, nobody grabbed the bowl that would have been available at the time. I've actually performed foot washing ceremonies as a pastor before, and as a kind of an illustration. And the feedback that I got afterwards, I've done it in different circumstances, and the feedback that I got from people was more uncomfortable for those that had their feet washed than it was for the foot washer. Which is interesting, and maybe that's just a cultural thing. Maybe that's because we're not used to it. We don't have to have our feet washed because we have our boots that we take off, and those are the dirty part, and so we would walk in with clean feet. And so maybe that's why Peter had an objection here. See, if we go back in the story, Jesus, of course, grabs the cloth and grabs the basin and begins to wash the feet of the disciples. And then he comes to Peter. And Peter here, doubtless all of the disciples were extremely embarrassed, most likely in this situation, by these proceedings. For most of them, their embarrassment bred beleaguered silence. They probably just were silent through the entire thing. For most of them, except Peter, he had to object. As at Caesarea Philippi, his objection is candid and well motivated, but totally ignorant of Jesus' course. Let's catch up in John chapter 13 as we begin to see exactly what Peter has an issue with. So again, after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part of me." You have no part of me. So again, the construction of this objection by Peter is one that says, are you going to wash my feet? No, you're my master, my Lord, my Savior. There's no way I am going to let you wash my feet. And Jesus responds, unless I wash your feet, you will have no part of me. No part of me. A person who had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean, and you are clean, though not every one of you. For he knew who was going to betray him. See, as I was talking about me being a 90% guy, that's how we all are in this circumstance. See, we can wash up and we can clean up. We can clean up our act. We could try to be good people. We could try to be the best that we can be, but we can only get 90% of the way there. See, God requires absolute purity from us, a holiness that only He can provide. We can only get 90% there. But to become righteous requires 100%. And to get to 100%, we need to have Jesus cover the rest, to wash our feet. And so Jesus says to Peter, unless I wash your feet, unless I get you 100% clean, unless you become righteous, unless you become holy, only because I can make you holy, only then, and only I can do what is required. Again, each disciple walked in the room probably at that 90% mark and probably were satisfied with that. And we're all sometimes satisfied. Oh, I'm 90% there. Isn't that good enough? But Jesus says, no. I want to kind of draw this into today's context a little bit. There's two different people in this scenario that Jesus wants us to draw upon. Jesus later calls out to us and says, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example for you that you should do as I have done. So there's those people that he calls out to be servants. And so we're all called to be servants. I was reading through 1 Peter chapter 3 this week, and again it reminds us that we are to be a royal priesthood. We are all servants. We are all called to be servants. We are all called to wash each other's feet. And in this circumstance of the COVID-19 journey, I just excitingly received a phone call today from a lady that would like to have some groceries. She's self-isolating, and she's also taking care of a senior in her home. And we're going to be able to provide her that service. We're going to serve her. But there's those in this context, as I visited one of my neighbors the other day, that we're all pretty self-sufficient. And if we're not self-sufficient, we feel we ought to be self-sufficient. And there's no way I'm going to ask for help. Like Peter, there's no way that you're going to wash my feet, Jesus. No way will I allow that. And it requires a level of humility. A level of humility that we feel that we're not willing to get to. I can get my own groceries. I'll find a way. No matter what it takes, I'll serve myself. There's people that are willing to serve you. Take advantage of it. Make use of it. If Jesus is willing to wash your feet, let him. It's a humble stance that Jesus wants us to take. So again, there's two different type of people in this scenario here. And we have to be both. We have to be willing to serve, and we have to be willing to be served. To be served requires a level of humility. And in our region, in the Kennebecasis Valley and the St. John region, we can do it ourselves, right? I don't need your help. Or do I? It requires humility to be served. That same humility that Jesus displays. As a church, we have a mission to grow community by loving, following, and sharing Jesus. And there's no better context than the context we're in right now to do so. I believe that we can grow community while we self-isolate. We can find ourselves in a place that we are loving, following, and sharing Jesus. And our vision is to allow God to transform our church into a 360 church led by 90-degree leaders. That's you. That's me. What it requires for us to be 90-degree leaders is what? Is to love God and love neighbor. It's a 90-degree relationship. The more we love God, the more we're able to love neighbor. 108 of us made the commitments to be 90-degree leaders. And I know there's many others that have, wanted to be part of that journey and are part of that journey and have made that commitment. Think about this right now. There's no better time in our history right now than to be able to have relationship with our three. Now, we can't have physical relationship with them, but we can call them, we can text them, we can connect with them, we can video chat them, and we can ask them, how can I serve you? What can I do for you? Now, those three I'm talking about is the idea that there's three people in our lives that we can have relationship with, that we can love like Jesus loved us. How can you wash their feet? Which draws me to Judas. Judas still had his feet washed. And Jesus knew. And particularly in this chapter, he knew that what Judas was going to be doing was already into play. But he still washed his feet. He still washed his feet. This act of washing Judas' feet leads him directly to the cross. There's no reason for him to wash Judas' feet, but he does. I appreciated my son's post on Thursday. I was proud of him. And he made me think about something too. he reflected on Judas and that betrayal of Judas. There's all kinds of people in our lives, and maybe there's one in particular you can think of right now that have betrayed us at one point. I've thought about those people in my own life that potentially have betrayed me, and sometimes I wonder if I'd ever have a conversation with them again. And then I breathe and wonder, does Jesus want me to wash their feet too? No, I don't mean physically washing their feet, because some of these people probably wouldn't want me to touch their feet. Not only touch their feet, but I wonder what it would be like to reach out to them in this situation and just connect. Maybe just have that phone call. Maybe just try to build that relationship. So as you think about your three, as you think about that one person that maybe you can connect with and build that relationship with, as you think about those people and how you can serve them, and then think about how it takes humility to be served. Maybe you're in that position. Maybe you just need to call someone up and say, hey, I need your help with something. I need some groceries. Or I need whatever it is. As you listen to this song right now, begin to reflect. Begin to reflect on your relationship with Jesus. And maybe you're not 100% there yet. Maybe you have to ask Jesus, can you take me to that 100% level? I want to be where you need me to be. Maybe it's not washing your feet. What is that 10% that is left unclean? What's that place in your heart that still holds you back from that 100% relationship with Jesus? What's holding you back? And if he unveils it to you, or you already know what it is, just say, Jesus, will you wash that part of me? Will you take that part of me and wash it? Make me 100% clean, because I want to be part of what you're part of. Reflect as you listen to this song in a time of worship.